Tactical squads make up the grunts of the Legiones Astartes, if such a thing could be said for such elite warriors. They served in huge numbers across the Great Crusade and during the Horus Heresy, and in modern times, of course, tactical squads exist in a different form, and intercessors have brought back much of their functionality from the heresy. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we will be covering the Legiones Tactical Squad for Horus Heresy, my first Horus Heresy video. So, they come in at 100 points. The Legionaries have a fairly standard Marine stat line. They move 7 inches. With weapon skill 4+, they hit on 3s at range. And with ballistic skill 4+, they'll be fighting mostly at 4s. With toughness 4, they are fairly standard with 1 wound. They have initiative 4, which is again totally standard, 1 attack each, with leadership 7 and 3+ save, so mediocre leadership and a solid save. The Sergeant is much the same, but he gains an extra attack and 1 extra leadership, which makes him very valuable, so you don't get pinned. In terms of unit composition, it's 9 Legionaries and 1 Sergeant standard. In terms of war gear, they all come standard with a bolter, which is 24-inch range with strength 4, AP 5, and rapid fire, and the bolt pistol, which is 12-inch range with strength 4, AP 5, which is pistol 1 and counts as their close combat weapon. The bolter is, of course, a fine enough weapon for just stacking saves, and can be very good against militia. They also come with frag and crack grenades. Frag grenades allows them to ignore the initiative debuff through charging through dangerous or difficult terrain, and crack grenades allow you to strike with an auto hit at strength 6 AP 3 at initiative step 1 when in combat with a vehicle, dreadnought, or fortification. In terms of special rules, of course, they have Legiones Astartes X, which means they gain the Legion rule for whatever Legion they are playing. And then their 2 special rules are Fury of the Legion. If a model with this rule did not move or run in the movement phase of its controlling player's turn, add 1 to the number of shots when it's shooting with a bolter. I believe this only applies to the standard bolter and not things like combi weapons, but I may be mistaken on that. And then Heart of the Legion is their secondary special rule. While a unit with this special rule has at least half of its models within 6 inches of an objective, they have the Feel No Pain 6+, and Stubborn. If a unit already has a Feel No Pain, improve it by 1, i.e. Feel No Pain 5+, becomes Feel No Pain 4+. And Stubborn, of course, means they can ignore leadership debuffs when they are taking leadership tests. Of course, the Feel No Pain is definitely very useful, as unless you're getting hit with something that's brutal, there's a solid enough chance to deflect any attack coming towards you, and the buff of a +1 to your Feel No Pains can be very useful when leading them with something like an Apothecarian detachment. For 100 points, this is about as cheap as you're going to get a unit this big for, and especially one this tough. They aren't going to do anything exceptional, but they are going to do their job very well. They're not flashy, but they're very effective, that's to be sure, and they are line, which I forgot to mention here. I'll do that in future videos, which means they can score objectives, and they are troops, so they can fill your compulsory troop slots. Moving on, we have to cover the wealth of options. So first up, a Legion Tactical Squad can take up to 10 additional Legionaries at 10 points each, so up to 20. One Legionary may take a Nuncio Vox for 10 points, or an Augury Scanner for 10 points, or a Legion Vexilla for 10 points. Of course, you can bring all 3, though they do have varying levels of usefulness. The Nuncio Vox, of course, allows you to reroll scatter dice so long as the model with it can see them. This can be when firing blast weapons or when a unit is being set up with Deep Strike. The Augury Scanner doesn't allow units to set up with infiltrators within 18 inches of the unit, very good if you're deploying forward. And a Legion Vexilla adds 1 to your wounds counted when trying to see if you want to combat, and you only fall Mac D6, and you can't run off the board edge, instead ending 1 inch away, which can be handy, but I'd say that these are not essential. I'd say that all 3 of them have their purposes, though. Augury Scanner is good for forward deployment, Legion Vexilla is useful for backfield campers, just so they don't run off the board, and the Nuncio Vox is just useful to have, but you don't need too many of them in your army. Any model with a bolter may take a bayonet, which is strength +1, AP dash, it's melee, 2-handed, and they're 1 point each, so they'll be hitting at strength 5, but of course, no getting a bonus attack because it's 2-handed, and the chain bayonet is the same, but gets shred for 2 points, and I'd say that's always worth the upgrade for the most part, as having shred is just very helpful. It means you reroll your wounds. All Legionaries in the unit may be given chain swords, which are strength user, AP dash, with melee and shred at 5 points per model. Of course, with their pistols, they would be able to get an extra attack for this, but I wouldn't say it's worth the upgrade over the chain bayonet, as while it is around twice as good, it does cost more than twice as much. The Tactical Squad Sergeant may take a Magna Combi weapon, which is 10 points for any of them, which of course comes with a bolter primary. Then you either take a Melta or Plasma Gun secondary. The Melta Gun is 12-inch range with strength 8, AP 1, Assault 1, and Armor Bane Melta with 1 shot. And the Plasma Gun is 24-inch range with strength 7, AP 4, Rapid Fire, Breaching 4+, gets hot, and 1 shot. The Melta Gun is of course handy just for 1 big anti-tank shot, and the Plasma Gun is similar but more so directed towards anti-infantry. Personally, I prefer the Melta Gun of the 2, though I'd say these are slightly too expensive to be worth it. The minor combi weapons are 5 points, and you get a bolter, and then either a flamer, volkite, or grenade launcher. The Flamer is a template with Strength 4, AP 5, and Assault 1. Solid enough, as it effectively just gives you a doubled up bolter. The Volkite is 15-inch range, so close range, but Strength 5, AP 5, Assault 2, and Deflagrate, so 2 extra attacks with Deflagrate is pretty handy, as Deflagrate is a handy roll to have. And the Grenade Launcher has 2 modes, Frag and Crack. Frag is 24-inch range with Strength 3, AP 6, Assault 1, Blast 3, and Pinning. And the Crack Grenade is 24-inch range with Strength 5, AP 4, and Assault 1. Pinning is nice, but it's Strength 3 and only the Small Blast. You're not likely to get any unsaved wounds on anything too important, so pinning them will be marginally useful. There's better ways to get pinning, though I'd say the Flamer or Volkite Chargers both have their uses, though the Grenade Launcher does have the nice use of being the same range as your Bolter, which is certainly nice. Though again, more so flavorful than I'd say necessary brings. Moving on, we have the rest of the options for the squad. The Tactical Sergeant may take one of the following, either a Chainsword, which I've already covered, the Heavy Chainsword, which gets Strength plus 2, which is nice because it means you'll be wounding Space Marines on 2s, as if you're 2 higher, then you get to wound them on 2s, and it also takes 2-handed, so you won't be able to get double attacks, but at 10 points I think it's a little too expensive, mainly because you can take a power weapon for 10 points. The Power Sword is Strength User, AP 3, Melee and Rending 6+. The Power Axe is Strength plus 1, AP 2, Melee and Unwieldy. The Power Maul is Strength plus 2, AP 3 and just Melee. And the Power Lance is Strength plus 1, AP 3, Melee and Reach 1. I'd say that all of these have uses, though my favorites are the Power Lance and Axe. The Power Sword does have the benefit of Rending 6+, which gives you D3, extra D3 armor penetration if you roll armor pen of 6, and also allows you to wound anything on a 6+ while also being AP2, which is handy. The Power Axe is AP2, which is very nice, but being unwieldy means you're hitting at Initiative 1, which isn't great, though it is a very cheap way to get AP2. It's just a tough ask for someone that may only be normal power armor or best artificer armor to stand that long. The Power Maul is just kind of generally handy. I'd say it's usually better on squad members than the leader of the squad. And then the Power Lance is my personal favorite at Strength plus 1. You're wounding Marines on 3s. AP 3 means it can cut through normal Marines easily, and Reach 1 is really good, as it gives you +1 initiative, which is huge, because that means your Sergeant will be hitting at Initiative 5, which allows him to usually outstrike other Sergeants, unless they also have Lances, and also, just in combat in general, allows you to get the first strike. He may also take a Power Fist, which is Strength 2, AP 2, Specialist Weapon, Unwieldy, and Melee. Specialist Weapon means you don't get the extra attack for wielding a secondary weapon, which would be your pistol in this case, and comes in at 15 points, so pretty pricey. And the Lightning Claw is Strength User at AP 3, Melee, Shred, Rending 6+, and Specialist Weapon. This one is just 10 points, though, which I think is a actually pretty solid way to replace your Power Sword if you really wanted to, but generally I would just stick to either a standard chainsword or one of the power weapons, just to have some melee punch, which is very useful. The Legion Tactical Sergeant also can exchange his bolt pistol for a plasma pistol, which is 12-inch range, Strength 7, AP 4, Pistol 1, and Breaching 4+, with Gets Hot. Of course, Breaching 4+ allows you to have a coin flip chance to be AP 2, which is very good for blowing up anything, though of course Gets Hot, solid chance he'll kill himself. And the Volkite Serpentis, 10-inch range with Strength 5, AP 5, Pistol 2, and Deflagrate for 3 points, which for 3 points I think is a great upgrade. And the Hand Flamer is Template at Strength 3, AP Dash, and Pistol 1, which is pretty bad. The Volkite Serpenta, of course, has Deflagrate, which I didn't mention. Any unsaved wounds you get to roll another attack for that auto hits, very useful. And Artificer Armor gives you a 2+ save for 10 points, practically auto-include, unfortunately. And the Tactical Sergeant may take Melt-A-Bombs, which are a Strength 8 AP1 melee detonation, unwieldy armor-bane melee, and instant death weapon, which can only be used against vehicles and dreadnoughts, but is a solid anti-armor punch if you want to, though I think it's sort of unnecessary. And they can bring a Rhino for 35 points. That doesn't take a Force Org slot, as it's a dedicated transport. In terms of buff options, the Apothecarian Detachment is what comes to mind immediately, as he gives them a 5+ Feel No Pain. That means on objectives they have a 4+ Feel No Pain, which if you fought, you know how frustrating it is, because even if you do get those saves through, it means any weapon just likely won't kill them. Brutal weapons can sort of get around that. Brutal weapons aren't very common, and if a weapon has Brutal, it's probably wielded by a super powerful character that's going to be destroying these guys anyways. And a Librarian I also wanted to mention from the Consularis upgrade. While expensive, he can give you either a 6+, or if you want to risk it, I say it's not very dangerous, for a 4+ Invuln. Of course, that just takes a psychic test, which is a leadership check, and Centurions have good leadership. I would only bring this, though, if you have another squad to buff, like a heavy support squad, as this is a large aura, though I would attach him to the tactical squad in case you do suffer perils of the warp. You can take the wounds instead on your tactical squad, instead of having to sacrifice your librarian or a valuable heavy weapon squad, for example. And his weapon also does allow you to shoot at vehicles moderately well, though. Nothing too big, it's just his telekinetic attack, because telekinesis is the discipline I'm referring to. Moving on, we have, of course, to cover all the legions, all 18 of them. So Dark Angels are up first. Stormwing gives them a +1 to hit, which is very nice, with their bolters. Ravenwing is situationally handy for units running around a lot, and I'd say is better for minimum investment units than slightly buffed ones. White Scars gives you +1 to move, which is always handy, and Imperial Fists give you +1 to hit with your bolters, which is very nice. The Blood Angels actually make them into a pretty competent bulk melee threat, not taking down Terminators or anything, but with something like Chain Bayonets, they'll be wounding Marines on 2s and rerolling fails. Of course, you're still fishing for failed saves given the lack of AP, but with how many attacks they have, they will definitely drag down a few of whatever they're fighting. Iron Hands gives them -1 strength against shooting, which is pretty nice, especially against things like Volkite or Melta. Volkite tears through tax good, and Melta instant deaths, of course. Ultramarines are a great way to get, these are a great way to activate the +1 to hit for friendly units. Makes a good screen and buff for your heavy support squads, for example, as these guys can shoot, and then your heavy support squads get the +1 to hit. And then Salamanders get -1 to wound from Flamers, Meltas, Plasmas, or Volkites, which is nice as they can reap a heavy toll on Marines, especially against things like Plasma Burners from the Dark Angels, and Volkite in general just really tears through Marines very well, though this won't save you from instant death, to keep that in mind, if the strength's twice your toughness. Raven Guard can give you, of course, the Talon, which gives you Shrouded 6+, which is a Feel No Pain effectively. It's only really useful when you're away from objectives, and they do gain Infiltrate, which is super useful, just to get on those objectives ASAP. Iron Warriors gives you +1 strength against dreads and vehicles while shooting, which means that, honestly, the bolters aren't actually that terrible against dreadnoughts. You can stack a few saves on them to hopefully finish off that walking nightmare that dreadnoughts are. Night Lords does have a sort of a combo. You can get a grenade launcher, which means you can get pinning, so you could pin a unit in theory, and then charge them to get the bonus, which would be nice, but since it's a small blast template, and it's a strength 3 weapon, it's more of a fun theory land idea than anything practical, because even if you do get an unsaved thing, they're probably just going to pass the test anyways, which isn't great. World Eaters gives you +1 attack, is handy. 3 attack chain bayonets won't be like ripping Terminators apart, but are very good for dealing with other attack marine equivalents. Death Guard, of course, means you can move through difficult terrain with no issue, and you always count as stationary, which means you always get Fury of the Legion. Very, very nice. And Thousand Suns gives you Corvidae for your first shot being able to be allocated by yourself, making your Sergeant a pretty good sniper with a Combi Melta, and Pavoni can give you +3 movement, which is definitely nice too to get to those objectives. I would say generally Pavoni's the better of the two, but Corvidae does allow you to have a very cheap character killer with that Melta weapon. Very good for taking out Sergeants to dodge Epic Challenge, things like that. Moving on, we have to cover the, of course, Sons of Horus, Sons of the War Master, which means you get -1 strength from enemies in melee, which can make things like Despoilers significantly less dangerous, and a lot of power weapons lose their shine at strength 4, or even lower for power swords. And this can be, honestly, kind of a good way to sacrifice a unit just to slow down a dangerous unit. If they only have power swords, or even just chain swords, something like that, these guys can charge into them with relative ease and not have to worry about getting completely ripped apart. Of course, it only lasts when they're charged to get charged, so it won't last forever, but it can be good to tie up a unit. Alpha Legion gives them being counted as 2 inches further away for shooting, charging, etc., which is very useful. Makes it harder to fire chip shots at them. It makes charging a lot harder, and at long range, it could earn a free turn of not being shot at, which is great. Just because they might have to move closer to shoot at you. Very useful. And I didn't mention some like the Space Wolves, Emp's Children, or the Word Bearers. They all have effects that are good. Space Wolves gives them advance and fire at snapshots, which is okay, but they rely on volume, not just hitting. And the boosted initiative is nice on Emperor's Children, but they're not going to be charging anything that dangerous willingly. I mean, that's not going to save them. And being debuffed to below 6 leadership is pretty hard to do, so that rule is pointless. And they're not winning combats that much, so the +1 wound won't really matter from Word Bearers. Moving on to competition, we have the Despoilers, which are just the melee version of Tactical Marines. They are probably more tactically flexible than Tactical Marines, which is a funny coincidence. I'd say a better spot for most characters, though of course Tactical Marines can chip in from range, which is something that Despoilers can't really do. They both have a place, and I often field both of them. They just do the same role, but differently. Breachers are slower, tougher, and way more expensive at 155 points for 10. Breachers are an interesting unit, but personally I'd prefer to just bring Tac Marines with an Apothecary, which is cheaper and probably tougher, with room for upgrades to be more threatening. But if just wanting a one-and-done tough unit, it's hard to beat the Breachers just to sit in the backline, but personally I just don't really like Breachers that much. They're not dangerous enough, and I find that without Heart of the Legion, they aren't that much tougher than regular Marines, in my opinion. The Assault Squad is similar to Despoilers, though more so, as they have jump packs. Though, again, they're way more expensive, 145 for 10. And they lack Heart of the Legion, so no Feel No Pain, and no Spite of the Legion. So regular Despoilers, while slower, have a lot more melee capacity. But the speed of Assault Squads gives them a lot of... a good niche, is really what it is. So out of the three, I'd say Despoilers are their best competition, but all three have spots. But they're just, all very good units in general. Next up, we have their best uses, and Tactical Marines are your defensive linemen of Heresy, if any of you watch football. They are not as flashy as your quarterback, they aren't your, Josh Allens, but they are very instrumental in winning still. They are line, so they're some of the only units that can score objectives, which makes them so important. They do that job very well. They're about as cheap as units come. There are cheaper units, but they don't have line, and they tend to be even more squishy. Or they are significantly more dangerous, but again, don't have line. They can still chip in at range against most infantry, and against elite 1-wound infantry, things like Destroyers, some of my favorite units, can actually be ripped apart by bolters pretty fast, which is not great for the Destroyers, but great for the Tac Marines. And Tactical Squads are just great options for your compulsory slots. They're very cheap, they're fast, and tough enough to need some firepower to remove. And don't think of them as a tax unit, because you can build them up, and I personally do. Personally, for aggressive squads that'll be in the main fighting line, I like Chain Bayonets, just because Shred is so useful to bully opposing, again, troops like Tactical Marines. So bring a Chainsword or a Power Lance if you want to be spendy on the Sergeant, with his Artificer Armor, of course. For 138 points, they'll do whatever job you give to them. Again, they aren't going to be ripping Terminators apart. Don't think they're unkillable. But against similar weight class units, they're excellent. And of course, they do their job very well of scoring and making sure they don't just instantly die to a stiff breeze like, say, Militia would be if you brought them as an ally. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.